Okay, I have 2:10 p.m. on the dot, so let's get started today. Would like to introduce you all to Phil Holleran and want to welcome you to our session today, Understanding Transparency in Learning and Teaching, or TILT, Principles to Address Inequities Among Students. Before we begin, I wanted to cover some housekeeping items. Please leave your cameras and microphones muted throughout the session. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature. We will get to as many of them as we can at the end of the session. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Phil Holleran. Phil is an instructor in business, economics, and marketing at Mitchell Community College. So without further ado, Phil, I will hand it over to you.
Great, Wendy, thank you. And you're going to allow me to share my screen, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As soon as you share, my screen will stop sharing.
Okay. Okay, are we good?
We are good.
All right. Well, thanks to you, Wendy, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone for being here. The one maybe relevant thing that's on this slide is the courses that I teach, business and economics, and that's mostly not relevant. But I do want to use an example today that comes from one of my economics courses. And so that may or may not mean anything to you, but I don't think it's an impediment to dealing with what we're trying to do here today, going through these ideas. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the assistance of several of my colleagues at Mitchell, Dr. Adam Atwell, Dr. Beverly Brown, Dr. Eva Givert, and Ms. Mamie Houston. The presentation that we're about to do is kind of a piece of a larger thing that the group of us did in-house at Mitchell a couple times in the last academic year. So I would like to acknowledge them because they deserve it, but also because if you find this presentation useful, I'd like you to let me know. And if you don't find it useful, I'd like you to let them know. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through, the problem's probably not the right word, but it's the best one I could come up with. So we'll talk a little bit about a problem and then how I used to work before I was introduced to TILT, then talk about the basic TILT framework and principles, and then how I've implemented TILT and how everyone could presumably implement TILT if they were so inclined, and then what's happened as a result of what I have done with TILT, both from my own experiences and from what the research that has been conducted has shown. And then I want to, at the end, kind of repeat the main resource for anyone who's interested in learning more about TILT. So, as I said, I teach business among other courses, and one of the things that we talk about in business, particularly when it comes to marketing, is this idea known as AIDA, that a business needs to get people's attention, that's the first A, then get them interested, create a desire for the product, and then move people to action. So if we sort of frame what we're going to do here today in terms of AIDA, I've called it the problem, but I think really what this is what got my attention. And it was being presented with some numbers from our institutional effectiveness director about student success rates in my courses, in my economics 251 and 252 courses in particular, data on success rates by various characteristics, primarily by gender and race. And it got my attention because there were some significant differences in student success rates by race and by gender. And I consider myself to be a pretty good instructor. But here I was confronted with some numbers that suggested that I was not a pretty good instructor, at least not for all groups of students. And so thinking about the numbers that I was presented with, I tried to kind of think about some particular students and some stories and some comments that I had heard from students over the years. And I've heard these comments, and I'm guessing that others have heard them too, but I sort of saw them in a new light. And so, for example, I would get comments like this. In fact, I got one just earlier today. A student would tell me, well, when we go over something in class, I really understand it. And then when we do it on the test, I just can't get it. And my comment had sort of always been, or at least my thought to myself had always been, well, then I think that means you didn't really understand it. Or a student who would say something to me, well, I didn't know what to do on this assignment because I didn't know what you wanted. And again, my thought to myself had always been, well, what I want is I want the right answer, sort of. But of course, those aren't very helpful kind of thoughts or comments. And so having seen some numbers and then reflected on these kinds of comments, I started to think more closely about, is there something actually that I should be doing differently because I'm not reaching all of my students. I'm not reaching all of them equally, at least. Some just on the basis of general characteristics seem to do better in my courses than others. So I started thinking about that and then kind of got that translated into a kind of a more generic picture where, well, there are rules, and there are unwritten rules of how do you do college? How do you do college? How do you do a class? Do you just sort of know what to do in order to succeed? And if so, how do you know that? And do some people not know how to do college or how to do a course or how to take a test? And of course, it's clear that there are some and perhaps many factors that can create differences among students, can create systemic inequities in the students' educational outcomes. And maybe some of those things have been exacerbated in the last couple of years as we've moved more and more things related to teaching and learning online. So, as I said, particularly the numbers got my attention. And to follow along the principles of AIDA, well, I was interested in doing something about it. I had desire to do something about it. So I needed to think about some kind of action. So I'd like to move into the action part. And I actually hope that we're going to get this is a chance where I'm hopefully not going to be talking all the time. That what I'd like to do is, before we've even talked about this idea of tilt, we don't want to worry about that so much, but I'd like to show you an example of an assignment that I used to give in my Economics 252 Principles of Macroeconomics course. And it doesn't all fit on one slide and kind of small print. So, but what I'd like to do is to ask you to think about, as you look at the assignment, these questions. What's the purpose of the assignment? Would you know what you were supposed to do on that assignment? And would you know how to do it? And would you know how you would be evaluated? And really what I'm hoping here is that we'll get some reactions to the assignment. Would you know about doing it? Would you know how you would be evaluated? So I'm really hoping here that we're going to get some something in the chat, comments in the chat, thinking about answers to these questions. So here is the first slide showing the assignment. This is really kind of the how do you submit it part of the assignment. So you got to follow these rules in order to get credit for it. Submit it in a Word compatible document. Don't include the questions, just your answers. Don't put it bold or italics or any of that stuff in there. So that's kind of the heading of the assignment. And then the content of the assignment, if you will, is this. So to read several articles and then address these questions, these 5 questions here. So why don't prison inmates use barter? Why would they use cigarettes as money? Why would they use mackerel as money? Why would they use ramen noodles as money? Which of those is the best? So again, thinking about the 3 questions, would you know what the purpose of the assignment is? Would you know how to go about doing the assignment? Would you know what you're supposed to do? Would you know how you would be evaluated on this assignment? So if you can put some things in the chat, which I can't currently see. So Wendy, can you tell me if there are comments that come up in the chat?
I'm not getting anything at the moment, Phil.
Okay. Okay. All right.
After lunch. Okay, Cindy Perez says, I wouldn't know what the purpose or the evaluation for this assignment would be.
Okay. Good. Good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not good, but it's good to have that comment, right? Okay. Thank you.
And Lee Hancock says, I don't see much about the assignment or assessment, excuse me.
Not much about the assessment. Okay. Excellent. Yeah.
And we have, I am guessing you just had a lesson on currency.
Sort of. Yeah.
And Jennifer Abanda says, no, I wouldn't. It's just instructions on what you want me to do, but nothing else.
Great. Yes. Thank you. And so, as I said, this is the way I used to do this assignment. And in thinking about, do students know how to do stuff? You know, the comment, I didn't know what you wanted. Well, in taking a closer look at this kind of assignment, I can see why maybe you didn't know what I wanted. It was clear to me, and to be honest, it was clear to some students what to do, but to many students, it's not exactly clear how to go about doing the assignment. So I wanted to know, what can I do differently? And fortunately, I had an opportunity to participate, and I'm thinking this kind of time has bled together the last few years, but I'm thinking this was in June of 2020. I participated in a system office workshop that was presented by some folks at Pierce College in the state of Washington on equity in the classroom. And one of the things that they introduced was this notion of tilt. And I was able to participate in a follow-up workshop later that summer about tilt specifically. So here's what tilt is. And I include here the website. This is a tremendous resource for anyone who's interested in learning more about tilt. There's tons of research about the implementation of tilt and how to do it and examples of how to do it. So tilt stands for transparency in learning and teaching. And transparency, the part of it, the transparent part of it, says that if you're going to be transparent in teaching, transparent in instruction, then you need to think about how students are learning. You need to think about why we are trying to get students to do particular things and how students are going to use this things that we're trying to manipulate them to do, how they're going to use this kind of learning in their college classes, or more importantly, in their broader lives. So tilt has several principles that we can follow, that we should indeed follow according to the tilt guidelines. And so there is kind of a template for doing tilt. Now, I would like to say here that the ideas of tilt can be applied to an individual assignment, which is what I'm going to describe here. But the principles of tilt could also be applied to a class session. They could be applied to an entire course, or indeed to an entire program of study. Same sort of principles would apply. So, what are the components of the transparent assignment design template? Well, first of all, there is purpose. And the tilt idea is that every assignment should be clear about its purpose. Its purpose can really be divided into two aspects. So those include the skills that students will either gain or practice by doing this assignment, and then the knowledge that they will gain from doing this assignment, and why those skills and why that knowledge could be important. Second part of the tilt design template focuses on the task, describing exactly what it is that students need to do. And then the third part is the set of criteria that would constitute successful completion of the assignment. So that's the general outline of tilt. And the next step will be to explain each of those in a little bit more detail. So what exactly do you do to describe the purpose? What do you do to describe the task? And what do you do to ensure that students know the criteria for success? And so, purpose. And remember, there are two parts of purpose. One is knowledge and one is skills. And even though I listed knowledge second in the previous slide, I've got it first here. Doesn't really matter. So knowledge. So an assignment should specify the content that students are going to gain from doing the assignment. What specific content knowledge will students learn from doing the assignment? Or what specific knowledge content will students reinforce from doing the assignment? And then, why does that matter? What is the context in which that knowledge is going to be used? Now, there are a variety of ways in which that context can be presented, a variety of ways in which that knowledge might have some context. So I'll just list a few here. Maybe the purpose is to tie what we're doing in the assignment to what we've been doing in class lately, or maybe it's a kind of a month-long section of the class, or maybe it's the entire course. Maybe what we're doing in this assignment is relevant to the entire program of studies or to our student learning outcomes for the program. Maybe what we're doing in this assignment has a link to the student's entire life, either at college or outside of school. So what are students going to gain from doing this? And in particular, how is it connected to something else, right? The purpose of doing it. Same sort of idea, that the assignment should describe the skills that students are going to practice or learn from doing this. So the assignment should say precisely what skills students will be employing, what skills students will be using while they're doing the assignment. And again, why does that matter? We want to link those skills, again, to a context where the skills are going to matter. Same sort of thing as we were just talking about with the knowledge. So, purpose. Why are you doing this? How does the knowledge that you're gaining matter? How do the skills that you're practicing matter? The next part is to describe the task. And it's good to break this down so that in presenting the assignment, you want to say, this is what you should do first. This is the first thing to do when you're working on this assignment. And then here are the next things to do. So step by step by step, what should a student do to complete the assignment? Now, there's a couple of reasons for doing this. One is that we want to help students not waste their time. We don't want students doing things that are unnecessary. We'd rather have them use their time productively and efficiently. So if we can help students know that you do this first, then you do this, then you do this to complete the assignment. And one other piece that we could think about that wouldn't necessarily be part of an assignment, but that is something that an instructor should be thinking about in making an assignment is this the sort of thing that that students would benefit from if they did some practice in it first before they did something that was graded on their own outside of class? Is it the sort of thing where it would be useful to practice going through the steps in class so they could kind of make mistakes and learn how to complete the assignment and then go do it outside of class? The third part of the template is the criteria for success. And this can be presented in a number of ways. Obviously, it could be done through a rubric or perhaps something a little bit less formal than a rubric, like a checklist of things to be accomplished in completing the assignment. But it might also be a description, simply a description of what a good assignment would look like. What does high quality work look like? And that might even include an example of what high quality work looks like. I know that in my introduction to business class, I have an assignment that is to produce an advertisement for a particular product. And I have a student who a year ago did something that was quite tremendous. And I show that to other students after they've done what they've done, because I'd like them to see what is possible. Maybe I should show the other students what this example looks like beforehand. I kind of don't want to intimidate them or make them or give them ideas that they would copy from someone else. But some way of showing somebody an example of what something really good looks like could be a way to help students know what a successful completion looks like. It's also the sort of thing that we want to talk about in class so that students know. And it should be the sort of set of criteria so that students can use that criteria while they're working on the assignment to know whether they're making good progress on it or not. So those are the characteristics of a tilted assignment. It describes purpose, both skills and knowledge. It describes the task, and it presents the criteria for success. Now, remember this is the assignment that we looked at earlier, right? This is the assignment we looked at, and it had this part to it. This was kind of the content part of it. What I'm hoping we can do here, well, two things. One, I'm going to show you how I have changed this assignment. But before I do, can anyone suggest what might be done to make it better in terms of using the principles of tilt? And I asked that question entirely selfishly, because if there are good ideas, I'll be happy to use them. So if someone wants to put a suggestion in the chat about, now that we've introduced the ideas of tilt, can you think of some way to make this assignment a better assignment following those principles?
Phil Sung Woo says showing students some high quality work example.
Okay, that could be done. Yeah, it shows a sample of what somebody in the past has done as sort of a model. Okay, could do that. Yeah.
And Jennifer Abondo says add a rubric to inform students of what you are looking for.
Okay, add a rubric. Sure, that sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Cindy Perez says add an overview section that introduces the concepts you will be exploring, how they relate to the course, and learning outcomes by the end of the activity. You will be able to, and add information about when the assignment is due.
Yep. Yep. That sounds good too. Yep. Anything else, or should I just?
That's all I have so far.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did. I tried to apply the principles of tilt to this particular assignment. And here is what I've got, and it's going to take 3 slides to show it all. So this is what it looks like. So here's when it's due. And then here's the purpose. So deepen your understanding of what money is and relates it to the concepts in the textbook. And this is an online class, so I created some videos to go along with it. And also says that this is going to help you for next week. So it's kind of linking, is providing a context. At least that's my intent, is to provide a context for this particular assignment. And then, I'm sorry, someone suggested saying something like, well, you will be able to. I think that's a fantastic idea. And so I had done that. At least I tried to do that. And connected it to, again, to the concepts in the textbook and to some of our course SLOs. All right, so that was the purpose part of it. Again, providing a context and exactly talking about exactly what concepts we're going to be using in completing this assignment. Okay, and then here's the task part of it. And I'll be honest, there are a couple of parts of this that I don't know, that I think are good. And one thing that I think that is much improved over the original is that very first step. This is an assignment about money and what might serve as money in the particular setting of prison, but illustrating general points about money. So I want students to be able to evaluate these different forms of money. Well, in order to do that, we need to know what money is. So it seemed to me that really a good first step is to make sure that everybody can define money in terms of the function it performs. So I'm glad I did that. I thought, I thought that was a piece that was really missing from my original assignment. Also suggesting how long an answer should be. So students say, well, I didn't know what you wanted. Well, I don't want one sentence. It's going to take more than one sentence to answer this question. So based on previous student work, this is probably, relatively speaking, how long an answer is going to be in order to do that. So I think I've improved it by that first piece, and then by including something about how long an answer should be. And then, yeah, here's it's not really a rubric, but at least it's a checklist that gives some idea. And again, this is part of the assignment, so students know that these are the things they have to do and how much each of them is worth in terms of completing the assignment. So I didn't intend to, but I sort of started sounding like I was bragging here. I didn't really mean to, because I wanted to ask this question. Do you think that do you all think that this is in fact better than the first assignment? And what could be done to make it even better? What other kind of tilt principles could I apply here that I have not applied thus far? What could I do to make it even better so that students will know exactly what they're supposed to do?
Bill Sung Woo is asking, in the previous version, there was a specific requirement for the file format DOC, not PDF. Does the revised assignment propped after tilt include that file format requirement?
It does, and that has been, that kind of requirement has been, shall I say, transferred to a separate sort of overall guide to how to do these assignments for the entire course. So there is a kind of one-time description at the beginning of the course that students have access to throughout the course that explains those kinds of formatting requirements. As you may have noticed, this is assignment number 9. We're in the 9th week of the course. So I'm hoping that by now students have that kind of formatting stuff down. But I still include it, but just not within the actual assignment itself. It's a separate description for better or
Also
worse.
says that overarching guide sounds like a fantastic idea.
Good.
That's all I have right now.
Okay, that's okay. So one of the things that I was wondering about before I began doing this was, all right, if I want to take my assignment before tilt and convert it into a tilt one, geez, how much work is that going to be? And here's the answer, at least for me. The answer is it took me an hour, which I think is just not very long. It took me an hour. I did it on the lunch break of the tilt workshop I was in. And so I don't think it requires a tremendous investment of time to actually do the changes. And I think the investment of time is worth it. And I'm going to present without any details here. I just will assert that there is a lot of research that shows that it doesn't take much to have an impact. That converting 2 assignments into tilt-like assignments, just 2 assignments in a course, will have positive effects, significant effects on student retention and persistence and student self-reporting of their own self-confidence in the course. So it doesn't take a lot to do this. It doesn't take a lot in terms of making an individual assignment go along with the principles of tilt. And it doesn't take many tilt assignments to have an impact. So I have been slowly implementing this in my various courses, doing 1 course at a time, doing 2 assignments per course at a time. And I've gotten to the point where I felt like I needed to talk to students about this, other than the fact that anecdotally, I think I see better performance from my students on their tests, on writing short essay answers on tests. But I decided to, this semester, present students in one of my classes with two versions of a particular assignment. It wasn't this assignment that you've just looked at, but it was similar. There was a before tilt and an after tilt. And I asked the students to evaluate them and tell me which one they liked better, which one they thought was clearer, which one they thought they would be more, which one they thought would better help them complete the assignment successfully. So I did this as kind of a bonus assignment for students to complete, low stakes bonus. And I got 51 students to respond. And by a margin of 2 to 1, they said they preferred the tilted version of the assignment. And I asked them to explain why they preferred one or the other or neither. And a typical comment from a student who, the typical comments from students who preferred the tilted version went something like this. It's easier, it's clearer what's expected of me, so I have more confidence in answering the questions. I appreciate having a good idea what a complete answer looks like. So that's what I was hoping for. Obviously, that's what I was hoping for. But clearly not everybody not all students preferred the tilted version. And I'm wondering if anyone can anticipate what the students who didn't prefer the tilt, that is the students who prefer the untilted version, I'm wondering if anybody can anticipate what that reasoning might have been. Why might students have preferred the untilted version? And I think you might be able to answer it based on the example that we've looked at here earlier. So if anyone wants to venture an answer to that question in the chat, why might somebody prefer the untilted version?
Okay, so Kara Robertson says the tilted assignment looks longer.
Exactly. That's exactly what the response has been. Yeah, it looks longer. It looks more complicated, according to some students.
And Jennifer Abondo says too many details to pay attention to.
And again, that's exactly what some students have said. Some students have said that. And what I'm wondering, and actually, these surveys were not anonymous, so I know who said what. And it turns out that the students who preferred the untilted version tend to be better students. Maybe they don't need, in some sense, all the detail. And to them, it kind of just gets in the way. But again, more students by a 2 to 1 margin said they liked the tilted version better.
That's all the comments I have on that question.
That was an easy one, I think, to answer, or maybe even to anticipate. There are some other objections that have been raised about the idea of tilt, and this is not coming from students, but coming from faculty. So, the argument that you can say, well, my assignments already are clear without tilt, and that's certainly what I would have said too about my assignments. My assignments are already clear. Yeah, it's easy enough to understand my assignments. And so I guess one way to think about this is to actually have a formal evaluation of the assignment. Ask students specifically, can they determine the purpose? Can they determine what to do? Do they know how they will be evaluated? So ask students, and maybe your assignments really are clear already. That's fantastic. But this is a way to kind of check. So ask students to evaluate the assignment, not to do the assignment, but to evaluate the assignment in terms of, does it do the purpose? Is it clear what the purpose is? Do students know what the task is? Do students know how they're going to be evaluated? Another objection, and this is one I've heard a number of times, and I actually think that there's something to it, that this amounts to spoon feeding students. That if you do this, if you spell everything out step by step by step, then well, it's going to get in the way of students developing their own critical thinking and problem solving skills. That by spoon feeding them, you're taking away part of the student's development. And I would actually say, yeah, I think there's something to that. So how can we respond to that kind of objection? So this is one thing that I do, that I've kind of been easing into this, but early on in the assignments, go full-blown tilt. Go all the way with the purpose and the skills and the knowledge and the task and the criteria. And as we move further and further into the course, kind of reduce those kinds of directions, if you will, so that hopefully students will have absorbed that kind of process of how to complete an assignment, and will start applying it even if those directions aren't made explicit to them. Or another approach is to say, all right, I'm not going to be transparent, but I'm going to do it on purpose. I'm on purpose not being completely transparent because that's one of the goals of the assignment. Because that's one of the purposes of the assignment, is so that students will struggle. And that's making it transparent, right? That's saying that this is one of the purposes is to struggle and for you to figure out, to use your problem solving skills to go about completing the assignment. So again, this is, I have become somewhat of an advocate for this tilt idea. As I said, I've been implementing it in my classes for about the last year, more and more as I go along more and more of my classes. And again, the idea that 2 assignments is all that's necessary. Once I got in the habit of making an assignment follow the tilt principles, it's pretty easy to do that for all of them. The last thing I would like to say is just to repeat this for anyone who is interested. The Tilt Higher Ed website, tilthighered.com. There's a woman named Mary Ann Winklemas who's kind of the leader of this thing. She's written a couple of books. There are a number of research papers that have been done. They are looking for people who want to participate in this, to help them gather further examples of the results of using tilt. So that's what I have. And it looks like we got about 5 minutes, and I'd be happy to address any questions or think about anything. And I will make the following offer. If anyone wants to start trying to use this in their courses and would like maybe some feedback on an attempt at tilting an assignment, I would be happy to comment on something that somebody would send me. Thank you all.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat and I will read them. Cindy Perez had a good comment. She says students should be challenged by the material, not the structure / organization of the course.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of thank yous for a great session. So Phil, be sure to open up your chat when you can and take a look at all the nice comments that we see here.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions.
Well, again, thanks to everybody for coming, and thanks for listening and for contributing to our little discussion. So I thank you all.
Thank you, Phil. Great job. And everybody, please be sure to log into your next session. The link to this session was only for this session, so you will have to go back to the new link for the new session. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Phil. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.